What's good, everybody? It's another episode of Fuego, Sonrisa podcast. You know who it is. It's your boy Fuego over here and Senor Sonrisa coming in. We have a great guest coming in today. She's originally from the LA area. She went to NYU, got a bachelor's degree in the art, ended up getting into a little bit of debt, just $81,000. But she was able to, she wrote a whole blog about her journey and the struggles of debt and all the challenges that came with it. And so we just wanted to welcome her. Her name is Melanie Lockert. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Melanie Lockert.
Lockert.
Okay. With an R, yeah, just phonetic. Lockert with a T.
Oh, Lockert, for sure. Yeah. Can you also just kind of give a background to the people who, just a little bit more of like how you got into debt and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be here and to chat with you guys. And this is a topic that I'm very passionate about because I think debt is so commonplace, especially student loan debt. And people like me, we're told that if you go to a good school, if you, work hard, that you should be able to pay off your debt. And I think that narrative has changed quite a lot. But let's go back, 10, 12 years ago, I went to NYU and got my master's degree in performance studies. I had my bachelor's degree in theater. And so, I'm very passionate about the arts and theater and performance. And so I took on student loan debt to go to college, like a lot of people. When I was 17, my dad said, "Hey, you want to go to college? Here, sign this." And so that's how I got into student loan debt for my bachelor's. And then, I was working full-time in the arts nonprofit sector for 3 years. And, then I thought, oh, I can move on to bigger and better things. I can move to New York and go to my dream school. And I went to NYU, and it was there that I tripled my debt load. And despite making payments for 5 years, by the time I graduated, I had $68,000 left. So in total, I borrowed $81,000. So $23,000 for my bachelor's degree, $58,000 for my master's, which is, $81,000. I estimate with interest, it was probably closer to $100,000, but because I don't know that exact number, I always just go to what I know, that I for sure borrowed $81,000. But if we look at the math, it's probably closer to $100,000 because we all know how interest works. And if you guys don't know how interest works, student loan interest accrues daily. And that's one of the things that made me so mad was I was like, why am I paying $900 a month as a minimum payment, but like 300 of it's going to interest? And it's because the interest just accrues so quickly. And so it's this constant feeling of taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you have to make massive payments to actually get out of debt. And it took me so long to get there. There's quite a lot to share, but that's kind of the abridged version of how I got into debt, why I got into debt. It was all student loan debt. I started my blog in January 2013, kind of because I was so depressed about my student loan debt. I couldn't find a full-time job in the arts after graduating. This was still a few years after the Great Recession. I went on interview after interview after interview. And I had this idea that because I went to NYU, that suddenly doors would open up for me, that things would be easier. And I think so many of us get into a bunch of debt thinking that this will get me into a new class. This will get me into new opportunities. And that's not always the case. And then you have to reckon with that result. And for me, realizing that that didn't automatically lead to more opportunities, that I was actually more broke after graduating than I was before at my full-time job, that suddenly I didn't have a full-time income to pay back the debt. That's really what led to the depression and anxiety, and what has led me to my blog, Dear Debt, my podcast, the Mental Health and Wealth Show, pretty much a lifelong, conversation and passion around these two topics of mental health and money and debt and depression, because they're so inextricably linked and people don't have the awareness that they're so interrelated.
Wow. What do you want to say?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, $900 a month. That's crazy. Ouch.
Yeah. So, that's wild.
How old were you when you finished getting out of college and had that whole debt on your shoulders? Like, how old were you?
So this was 2011. So I had just turned 27.
Ooh.
And it was this time when a lot of my friends were, getting married and having kids and buying houses. And then suddenly I was kind of more broke than I had ever been. And I had to make a lot of financial choices that kind of seemed like I was a broke 20 something, but in fact, I was approaching 30. And so that was really difficult for me in the beginning because my debt physically made me ill. It made me mentally unwell. I felt so anxious about it. I just felt like there was an elephant on my chest. I felt like, how am I ever going to pay this back? And I'll admit that I'm very risk averse with debt. I do not like owing people money. I don't like feeling like I owe anybody anything because it makes me feel like I can't rest until that's taken care of. It makes me feel like as long as I owe something, then my money's not mine. And, I have come to realize through all of these years of talking about debt and depression that I think the crux of debt causing mental health issues is that it quite literally tethers you to the past. You're paying for your past. So it's like, even though I had graduated, I had tried to move on with my life. I even moved to Portland, Oregon, and had a cheaper cost of living, did something different. I'm literally paying for my past decisions. And when your decisions don't pay off quite literally the way you think they will, that can cause a gap in what you were hoping and then what really happened. And that obviously can create depression, which happened for me. And so, all these mental health issues had already arisen. And to be honest, I already am prone to mental health issues. I've had clinical depression. I've had clinical anxiety. I have clinical OCD diagnosed by a psychiatrist, but this was unique in the sense that this wasn't a chemical imbalance. This was a situational thing. So for people that might be unaware, there's typically, kind of chemical imbalances that can lead to mental health issues. There's also situational, we've seen this with the pandemic. A lot of people who might not have ever experienced mental health issues suddenly know what it's like to deal with mental health issues because of the situation of the pandemic. And, debt made me feel super depressed, and it just took so long to pay back and really mess with my self-worth. And I mean, yeah, like I said, I was 27 and it took me until I was 31, 32 to finally pay it off. I'm 37 now. I've been in this world for quite a while now. The blog's been around for almost 9 years, which is wild to think about, but happy to be here on the other side to share my story.
What was the motivation for you to change the mindset? What was the motivation to be like, you know what, I'm not gonna have this? Because I was listening to a podcast you were talking about. You said you were having you decided to change the relationship you had with your debt. So I'm just kind of curious, what made you change the relationship with the debt that you had?
Good question.
Yeah, pretty much it was because I hit a dead end. If you've ever been in a situation in life where you feel like you're in a cul-de-sac where you just keep going, or a better metaphor is you're on a broken record where you're just playing the same tune again and again, and you're like, I'm sick of this song. The song's not working. Like, put on something different. And so, I graduated in May 2011. By 2012, I had moved to Portland, Oregon to be with my then partner and cut my cost of living and, really focus on paying off my debt. And I thought that I would be a big fish in a small pond. Pretty much that was not the case. I moved to Portland and the economy was worse there because it's a smaller city. I was making $25 an hour teaching theater in Harlem before, and I could not find really a well-paying job. It was like offering $10 an hour in Portland. And, granted, my rent was $400 at the time. I was like, still, I have a master's degree. I don't really want to do that. But I did end up making $10 to $12 an hour. That first year I was in Portland, I ended up on food stamps for a brief period of time. And, no one really goes to get a master's degree and, thinks that they're going to end up on food stamps making $10 to $12 an hour afterwards. And, people are always like, well, what did you expect? You got a degree in performance studies. What is that? And I get the hate. I get the judgment. But I mean, even if it's a quote kind of BS, like liberal arts or arts degree, like you should still be able to find something, right? And so I couldn't. And for all of 2012, I was just in this trap in my mind of feeling stuck and depressed, and just realized that I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't getting any jobs. I felt like I was in a perpetual loop. And so by the end of 2012, I did what a lot of people do is I went to Google and I was like, how to pay off student loan debt. And I discovered personal finance blogs and I devoured them. And I was so inspired because there were people talking about paying off debt and there were people talking about how they did it. And I was so inspired because I had never known anyone in my real life who had actually paid off debt before. And so I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I can do it. But what I noticed was that no one was talking about the emotional impact of debt. No one was talking about the mental health impact of debt. And also, as inspiring as those stories were, a lot of them were like, I overspent and, I downsized from a 3-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, or I sold my car and I paid off my debt in 6 months. And I was like, well, I didn't overspend. I did what I thought I was supposed to do, number one, and go to school. And number two, I don't have anything to sell. Like, I'm a minimalist and I have nothing to my name. Like, I share a studio apartment with my partner. Like, I don't have a car. I didn't have health insurance at the time. I was like, I literally have nothing to sell. So I felt like my story was unique. And so I had this epiphany that if I use the same amount of energy that I used crying about my debt and being upset about my debt to actually try to pay it off or have a creative outlet with it, that maybe I had a chance. So that was kind of the first switch of realizing I'm expending so much energy, crying, being upset, anxious, but that's not getting me anywhere except hitting my head against the wall. But maybe if I can try to actually use that energy to deal with my emotions related to debt, to actually pay it off, maybe I have a chance. And so January 3rd, 2013, I created my blog, Dear Debt. It's kind of a spin-off of the Dear John concept. So, there's these Dear John letters, like I'm breaking up with you.
Yeah.
And so, I started writing breakup letters to debt, like, Dear Debt, I'm so over you. Like, I'm kicking you to the curb. And it was just a way for me to anthropomorphize my debt and kind of like put some distance between me and the debt and pretend it was a person, and kind of in a safe space acknowledge my feelings that were eating me alive. And so it was a really fun way to creatively channel my energy and my mental health. And then because I wrote it publicly, I started getting attention. And so I started building an audience, and I had other people saying, oh my gosh, I feel the same way too. And so I realized I wasn't alone. And it just created this snowball effect of, I was honest about my story. I started writing about it publicly, and other people were cheering me on. And I had no idea how much I needed that kind of cheerleading to be like, you can do it, because I was so miserable. And so the blog completely changed my life. Every single month, I would write updates about the side hustle adventures I went on. I would talk about how much debt I paid off that month. I would write Dear Debt letters. I would invite other people to write Dear Debt letters as well. And so, it just changed my whole entire life, and it led me to the career that I have today. So, early on in the blog, I was still working temp jobs. I was working as a pet sitter. I was working as a brand ambassador. I did TaskRabbit gigs, like moving. I sold water bottles in an overnight rave once.
Nice.
Like pretty much anything that was like legal, I would do, that I would find on Craigslist and TaskRabbit, because I was like, I need more money. Because as I mentioned earlier, I'm a minimalist, so I don't really have anything to sell. So if you're in my situation and you have a lot of debt, you're not making a lot of money, and you have like basically no assets to your name, I was like, frugality is only going to get me so far. Like, I can't cut back anymore, like at all, unless I move back in with my parents, which is not an option. So I was like, well, if I can't cut back any further, the only option is to earn more money. So I became addicted to side hustling, and that's, where all these crazy stories came in. But what really changed things was through the blog. So about 6 months into blogging, I realized that some of my other blogger friends were writing for other blogs, blogs that had been monetized, and they were making money, writing blog posts. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like going all over town doing these weird gigs. I would love to write for other blogs. Like I at least have a master's degree. I can write at least to a certain degree. And so I started talking to my friends who are working as blog writers and pick their brains. And then I started cold pitching and I got my first $25 blog post.
Nice.
That was my key to starting my self-employment career. And obviously I make a lot more money than $25 blog posts. And granted, the articles are a lot more intensive now, but for over 7 years, I've been a full-time freelance finance writer. And it was that first little bit that really transformed my life, because by 2014, I had doubled my income from 30,000 to 60,000. And, you know, when you can double your income and your rent is $400, that's what really helped me pay off my debt. So everyone's like, how'd you pay off your debt? I want to know. And I'm like, two things. I had a low cost of living in Portland, Oregon, sharing a studio apartment. And to be honest, it was all because I really worked on my income. I doubled my income from 30,000 to 60,000. And that's a huge difference when your rent's $400. So I kept my lifestyle the same. And then I just kept throwing money at the debt. And by December 10th, 2015, I was debt free, and I've been debt free the rest of these years. And it's amazing.
Nice.
There's just no greater feeling than like not owing anybody money, that you can actually keep your money, that you can get your money to work for you, and you can use interest in the opposite way through investing. Like I can build my money and get my money to work for me instead of pay more because of interest. So it's like, now I'm on the other side of the interest equation. It's like, you work for me now. I don't work for you. You work for me. So that's kind of the abridged version of my debt payoff story.
That's sick. It's cool how you found a creative way to talk about your debt, where you made it a relationship between the debt being an actual person and yourself, talking about what this thing has done to you personally, mentally, everything. I guess just to kind of stay on that. What was my question? No, I'm just kidding. My question is that with that happening, and also you just making that switch, right? Making that switch from just going through, I guess I would say, just going through pain, just going through loathing and going through all this pain, and you just making that switch. It's amazing how much your whole life has changed. I guess the question is, how do you get somebody who has been in a rut like that? Mm-hmm. How can you maybe give them the right word, the right tools? What can be something that you can say where they maybe that's all they need is just that switch to change, and they just can't for some reason.
Yeah, for sure. And to sound like totally cheesy and lame, I'm going to quote an Instagram meme that I literally just saw, but it very much relates to what I'm about to say. The meme that I just saw relates to my story, and it says, nothing changes if nothing changes. And that is really kind of what happened. So when I was stuck in the rut, I was just trying all the same things that had never garnered results. I applied to 8 million jobs. I, tried to go to networking events. I tried to earn more money here and there. Some of it worked, but largely it did not work. And I was just kind of stuck in a thought pattern that was unhealthy, right? And I realized I had to shift my money mindset around my debt and also what I was actually doing. So let's start with the mindset part. So, like a lot of people, I thought student loans were the good debt. I thought that everybody has student loans. And while that might be helpful to think about for some people, it was not helpful for me. And so, I had to really realize, like, I don't think student loans are the good debt. And as long as I think student loans are good debt, then I'm just going to be complacent with paying them off. But actually, they're not good for me. So I had to make that shift. I also had to really interrogate the money stories that were holding me back. So my family, grew up middle class. My mom grew up, in the projects with 6 kids to a single mom. So she grew up in kind of a lower class than I did. And so I feel very privileged in that way, but there was still, money tensions, feeling like there was not enough money, feeling like money doesn't grow on trees. this feeling that that rich people are greedy, and you have these beliefs, and then you're like, well, if I think rich people are greedy or rich people are evil, then of course I'm not going to attract money or make money because that's what I think. And so I had to really evaluate my mindset issues that were holding me back. And so I was like, what if money is neutral? What if the people that are rich and evil, maybe they're just evil and money is exacerbating that, but you can also be good and have money. And so I had to really kind of interrogate those beliefs to get past that. So that was the first part. And then the second part was really just thinking, okay, clearly what I've done has not worked. Let's start something new. And so it's really fascinating because right now in 2022, we clearly see the impact of the creator economy, the influencer culture. This was back in 2013 when it was not as hot, right?
Yeah.
But it was still like kind of burgeoning, right? And so I just realized, if no one's going to give me a job, then let me create my own job or my own hobby that I actually like doing. And that's what I did. I was like, well, I'm just going to do what I like to do then, because no one's paying me to do anything. And then sure enough, 6 months later, I realized other people were getting paid to write. And I was like, well, I don't have any like official writing experience, but I have this blog. And essentially this blog is a portfolio. People can read my writing and at least get an idea. And so then it's like, people are like, okay, we've seen your blog, we'll hire you. And it's like, oh my God. And I started to realize it's actually kind of easier to get these one-off gigs than it is to get a full-time job with benefits, because I'm creating the product that people want. And I have a portfolio that I'm creating, and then people see it and then they're hiring me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually sharing my talents and my thoughts with the world. I'm inadvertently creating a brand. I'm inadvertently sharing my talents and what I cannot do. You know, I'm basically creating an online resume, and I had no idea what any of this stuff was in 2013. And I was like, suddenly I know about social media, I know about blogging, I'm practicing writing, I'm practicing SEO. Like I had no idea what any of this stuff was. And then obviously, you know, 7-8 years later, I'm like very well versed in this. This is my career now. And I make my full-time living as a freelancer and in the finance space. But it's like, I essentially created my own job by starting my blog. And that's where I said, you know, starting my blog really changed the trajectory of my life. And also 2016, like right after I paid off my debt, my book, Dear Debt, came out. It was published. You know, I had a book publisher reach out to me and they were like, do you want to turn your blog into a book? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. And so it's like, I just want to share with people. I mean, we see this very clearly today, but you know, go back to 2013, you didn't see this as much, but you see people every day sharing their talents online because they want to, because they need to, because maybe they're not getting the opportunities elsewhere. And then people come knocking later on when they're like, oh, I see that you do actually have talent and you've been doing this thing on your own. And so my biggest advice for people is to do things that you have not tried yet. And that may be unconventional, because I mean, when I quit my job, like I finally did find a nonprofit job making $30,000 2 years after graduation as an events and communications coordinator, but I was only there for 1 year. And I quit to become a freelance writer and an event planner. And my mom was like, what are you doing? You literally just spent 2 years to like get this full-time job with benefits. Like, are you out of your mind? And, you know, a lot of people in older generations don't get it. They don't understand it. And then it took, you know, me making more money and paying off my debt and publishing my book. And then later doing my Lola retreat events, which are women and money events. And then my podcast. My mom is like my biggest fan now. And she's super proud, but like, you kind of have to go against the grain for a while, because people who aren't in that community they're like, wait, what is your job? Like, what do you do? Wait, how do you make money? And it's like, hey, people don't have to understand blogging or freelance writing or affiliate marketing or podcasting or SEO. I don't care what they understand or not. It's like, I'm making a living from this. So I don't care if you get it or not. My bills are paid from me. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, I
Well said.
encourage people to try to do something out of the box. And I had never seen myself as a blogger or a writer. I had never had like a huge talent for writing. Not to say that I was the worst writer, but I studied a lot, I practiced a lot, and I don't think I was like a natural born talent. And I just wanted to say that out loud because I think a lot of people think they have to have some inherent talent to do anything. And I think that's BS. I think experience and doing the work is what actually makes you better. Obviously, you have a hand up if you have some kind of inherent talent, but experience is the greatest teacher. And so getting out of your comfort zone and doing something completely different will help you shift into different results. Because like I said, back to the cheesy Instagram quote, nothing changes if nothing changes. So if you're doing the same thing, expecting a different result, I think as Albert Einstein said, or someone else said, that's insanity. Like, it's not working. So you have to try something different. And it's so scary and nerve-wracking at first and lonely, but you never know. Like, I would have never guessed in my wildest dreams that my life would have changed so much from a single blog post. And you can totally go back and read the absolutely cringy first post. I'm like anonymous. I have like my face blurred out because I'm still anonymous at that time.
I gotta go check it out.
It's not like the best written. It's like very doom and gloom. Like, this is a do or debt situation. And actually, funny story. So the blog was actually originally called Do or Debt, like a do or die situation. But then on the URL, I was like, oh my gosh, it reads as door debt. And I was like, that doesn't look great. Like, door debt. Like, I don't know if people are going to get that it's do or debt. And so about 6 months in, I rebranded to Dear Debt. And that was like much catchier and much better. And people understood like the Dear John, Dear Debt letter concept. Like, I started gaining more traction then. So, I started messy and like not right. And I rebranded quickly after, and that was the better choice. So, start messy and clean up later.
As long as you start with something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, starting something and producing something will always give you better results than just thinking about it or doing research. Like, so many people get stuck in this phase of like, I can't do it until it's perfect, or I can't do it till it's right. And it's like, you're wasting time, and it's so much better to just try it and then realize what works and what doesn't, and then change quickly.
That's well said. Yeah, I mean, when we started, we didn't even have like Zoom, nothing. It was just us just talking into a mic and just kind of sharing our experiences.
Yeah, exactly. You learn things along the way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And we learned about like images and having design and t-shirts and all this other stuff. So it's been a process.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah.
It's been a huge learning journey. Yeah, like similar, like I just launched my podcast 2 years ago, the Mental Health and Wealth Show, like right before COVID. And it was so scary for me because I had clearly become so comfortable as a writer. Like, that's how I make my living. That's how I started blogging. But like, podcasting is a whole different animal. And now I don't even think about it because I have a podcast and I'm doing a podcast now. But like 2 years ago, I was panicking. I was like, I don't even know how to record. What do I do? Like, what do I do? It's just like, everything is so scary when you're a newbie. But then think about a year later, you're probably not even going to be thinking about the problems that you thought you had.
You're thinking about something else.
Yeah, exactly. New problems, new level, new devil.
Yeah, exactly. The next level. Yeah. I did have some questions. Like, I did. You talked about like when you were in Portland, Oregon, your finances were so strict that you didn't even go out for a few years. Can you just talk a little bit about like, I guess, that process of like, I guess, social isolation and now we're experiencing now in a kind of bigger level, but how you went through it, how you overcome, did you do like any hobbies to kind of push yourself forward? Just kind of curious.
Yeah. So what I will say is, when I was in Portland, Oregon, like I said, I shared a studio apartment with my then partner and paid $400 in rent. So that obviously really helped. I did not have a car. I did not have health insurance. I did go out occasionally, but what I did do was, it was always for the cheapest happy hour I could find, or for coffee. And I really mastered this thing that I write about in my book called being a frugal friend without being rude. And so what would happen is, I would get invited to a birthday party, like, oh, we're going to this sushi place, we're, going out, like, do you want to come? And it's like, I know that I would love to go out for sushi, but like, I'm so committed to my debt repayment that is going to set me back. And so what I realized quickly is that you can say no to your friends, but if you don't follow up with something in your budget, they're going to stop inviting you out. So you have to say, thanks so much for thinking of me. I would love to. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for me, but I'm wondering, how about next Tuesday if you'd love to go for a coffee and a walk with me? I would love that. So I did a lot of coffee and walks. I did happy hours. I also was an event assistant at a Jewish congregation. So I invited friends to come to like the events and eat food with me.
Nice.
I, invited people to come over for potlucks, whatever I felt was in my budget. And I think it's really important for people, like, you can totally say no, that's outside of my budget, but really retort with something that is within your budget, whether it's a coffee, happy hour, potluck, just going for a walk. If they're really your friends, they just really want to see you. But you kind of have to invite them back, because I think we all know, like, if you have a friend that keeps telling you no, you're going to stop getting invited out, and that's not good for your mental health either. At first I tried to be like, I'm never going to go out again, but that doesn't work, because the thing with my debt is, like, I had to make 4-figure payments for years. Like, obviously paying off $81,000, like, I was like, oh my gosh, even if I pay $1,000 a month, like, that's years of repayment. And so, I read all these blogs where it's like, I paid off my debt in 6 months or 9 months or a year. And I'm like, I still have like 4 or 5 years of repayment. And like every single month I'm paying $1,000+. And that can really wear you down. And so that's what I call debt fatigue. And it's, when you're kind of in that messy middle where you're like, I'm not as inspired by this goal anymore, because I've come a long way, but I still have so far to go. I'm not really enjoying my life. I'm putting so much towards debt. And so what I recommend in that case, and what I did for a while, is I stopped putting so much towards debt. And some months I put more towards savings, because it was psychologically more beneficial for me to see more money in my bank account than it was to pay off debt. There were a few months where I was like, I'm going to spend a little more money on recreation because I'm miserable. And I also created debt milestones. So like, after $1,000 paid off, I can go to a happy hour. After 5,000, I'm going to go to a massage school where they have like $30 massages, and I'm going to get a cheapy massage school massage. $10,000, I'm going to go on a day trip, right? So some people are, judgy about like, oh my gosh, you're spending money for rewards. Yes, because it works. Think of children. Like, we reward them, and try to entice them with good behavior. The same thing works with adults. So I was like, I need these things to look forward to. And so that really helped me too, is creating debt rewards with debt milestones. And then what really helped is I was in another phase of debt fatigue, and one of my friends had just moved to Spain, and I was like, I want to go on this trip to Spain. And I felt like, oh, I shouldn't go because I'm in debt repayment, but I travel hacked credit card miles to go. I was going to stay at her place for free. So the 2-week trip was very affordable. And I was like, you know what? For 2 weeks, I'm just going to not think about my debt. I'll reevaluate my plan for debt afterwards. I like really need this break. I had the best time for 2 weeks. And then when I came back, I had a clear head. I felt rejuvenated. And I looked at my debt and I was like, oh my gosh, if I hustle hard for 6 months, I can be debt free in 6 months. And it was that 2-week break that actually gave me the energy to do that. If I didn't take that 2-week break, it could have taken me probably a year or more to pay off the debt. But because I had that break, I was like, now I can sprint and I have extra energy to do this. So I do think breaks are necessary. I do think you have to take care of your mental health. And I've talked about this on my podcast before, is, I was so hardcore with my debt repayment. if I were to do it again today, I would not be as hardcore because my mental health was impacted. My relationship was impacted. We broke up eventually,
wow.
not totally because of that, but partially. That was like not a healthy part of it. And so it affected a lot of aspects of my life. And so if I were to do it again, I would not hustle as hard. And especially given everything we've been through with the pandemic and now this war, it's like we're all just emotionally tired and hanging by a thread, I feel like. So I would just, do the best I can and try to make progress, but I wouldn't go so hard at the expense of my mental health. And also another thing that I would not do, which is a mistake I feel like I made, is I did not invest until I paid off my debt. And so I paid off my debt when I was 31 and I was starting at net worth zero, basically. And like, while that felt good, it felt good for about 2.5 seconds. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm 31 and I have like zero. Like, yeah, I'm debt free, but I have zero. And so then I was like, crap, I really should have invested while paying off debt. But there's this whole argument of, should you invest while you're paying off debt? And like, you totally can do both, but I was totally drinking the Kool-Aid that you couldn't, and I regret it. So I just want to share that because it was a wake-up call to wake up at 31 and be like, I have no retirement savings at all whatsoever. And now I'm officially behind. And now I'm going to divert my debt payments toward retirement.
Dang, that's interesting. That's interesting that you even hit that topic because that is something that I noticed. Like for myself, like I had a lot of credit card debt, so that was my debt. I mean, I'm paying it off now, and it was just like that whole idea behind should you invest while you're paying off your debt. And I went through a whole bunch of cycles of so many videos that I would watch about both sides. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I just realized that I could do both. And I was like, whatever, I guess I got to a point where I just, whatever happens. I'm already in debt, like the worst thing that can happen is bankruptcy. So I'm going to just try my best to at least keep saving, keep investing, and at the same time pay it off. So that's interesting because, yeah, I have noticed that they say either you do one or the other. And sometimes you can get stuck in like just that tunnel vision of just paying off your debt. But I never heard the ending of how you said it, that you come out of it like, yay, but you're like, wait a minute. Like, oh man, I don't have nothing. I have no retirement.
The net worth zero feels good for like literally 2.5 seconds because you're like, oh, I'm not in the negative anymore. But then you're like, but I have nothing to my name, like literally nothing. Cool. And yeah, I think like there's so much kind of black and white thinking in personal finance, and spoiler alert, so much of life is in the gray.
I wouldn't have known.
Right? I mean, like so much of life is in those like murky gray areas, and it's so dependent on your situation and everything. And what I want to tell people is like, excuse me, if you're in credit card debt or whatever kind of debt, like don't take it as a personal failing. There are so many things that are stacked against you. So first of all, wages have been stagnant for like literally 40 plus years. So they have not kept up with inflation. Number two, inflation this year alone is 7.5%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
With this new war, it's projected that it could potentially go up to 10%.
Oh, man.
And we don't have any paid family leave or sick leave. So if you're a mom, if you're a caretaker, if you get sick and you're an hourly worker and your job doesn't provide benefits, good luck. All of these factors like really kind of show us that we're playing a rigged game. So if the math isn't mathing, as what another thing I've seen on social media, I'm sorry, I'm like a Twitter junkie. And so I just like repeat things.
We welcome it. It's all good.
But like one of the quotes that I love is like, the math isn't mathing. And I'm like, yeah, that's like most personal finance. The math is not mathing because it's like education has skyrocketed, childcare has skyrocketed, healthcare costs have skyrocketed, wages haven't. Wages have stayed stagnant for like 4 decades. So no wonder we're all behind trying to make this imperfect puzzle work. And so, I think that's important to consider. And then it's really important to think about what's the root cause of the debt. Is it an income issue, meaning you're just not making enough money? That was my issue. Is it a spending issue, meaning you're emotionally spending, you're impulsively spending? A lot of emotional spending comes out of trauma or kind of mental health issues that are unchecked. Like I've seen this with so many of my friends in the pandemic. They're just like, I'm bored, I'm anxious, I'm stressed. I get a quick dopamine hit when I buy online. Or is it something really innocuous and, not your fault, like a medical bill? I mean, from what I read, medical bills are like 60% of bankruptcies, which is
Wow, it's
crazy and horrible to think about. And another terrifying thing of living in the US is like, you just never know. One illness is like, could put you in debt. So think about what are the root causes that are, putting you into debt, because whatever that root cause is will inform your plan. Like I said, for me, I was like, I'm just not making enough money. Like 2011, 2012, I was making $16,000 to $20,000. 2013, I made $30,000. 2014, I made $60,000. So it's like making between 16 and 30,000, like that's not a lot of money. And so I was like, the only way I can pay this off is to earn more money. But for other people, like if they have compulsive spending problems, you have to kind of think about, why am I spending so much? Is it boredom? Is it anxiety? Is it stress? Is it, I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses? And it's like, the Joneses are everywhere on social media these days. It's not just your neighbors. And, really unpack what those purchases mean to you, because like I said earlier, sometimes we go to fancy schools as a way to buy a new class or increase our status. People do that with products all the time. They buy fancy stuff they can't afford because, oh, well, this will make me look rich. This will make me, appear a certain way, right? And so really unpacking all of this can be quite emotional and taxing in and of itself, by the way.
I really like how you talk about like the relationship with money, and like you have to have a certain type of relationship with money. And I think you talked about in one episode how money is power, and power can be used either for good or for evil, in that sense. And I also wanted to talk, I'm just kind of curious to hear what you think about also getting into a relationship like with somebody else who has, who doesn't have a good relationship with money, or, maybe you're a saver and they're a spender. And so there's this collision of values that just happen. And how would you, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that, or if friends have been in a situation, but just kind of give your opinion of that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful question. And I think it's so important. And I think it really depends on the situation and the type of people. So I'll give two examples. So me and my ex-partner, we had different financial values, and I was very much obsessed with paying off my debt, and he was not. And it became a clash eventually of like, we're just not on the same page here. And there were other issues that I won't get into, but ultimately that was one piece of the puzzle where I was like, okay, this is not going to fix itself. And it's something that I feel like will not work out in the long run. So you have to also kind of understand at what point and at what circumstances do things happen where it's like, okay, this is just not compatibility anymore, given the rest of the equation as well, right? Like this is just not something that I can put up with. My new relationship, my partner has some debt. Like he has this condo that we live in. He has a mortgage. He's not as, obsessive about paying off debt like I am, but he uses it as leverage to build assets, like getting a mortgage, like freeing up some cash so that he can leverage that. And that is such a different point of view from mine. And when we first started dating, I was like, I felt uncomfortable because I was like, we should be debt free. Like we should everything should be zero. Da, 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 da. And then I was like, but he knows what he's doing. He's a smart man. He has a condo. He's building equity. He's paying it down. It's not like he's racking up credit card debt. It's not like he's overspending. He's like using it strategically. And so I had to like calm my own nervous system and realize he's doing things differently, and I can respect that. And then he understands that I have a different point of view, and he knows my story, and he's super proud of my story. And so looking at the big picture, I was like, okay, I know you're investing for the long term. I know you're using the debt as leverage to build your assets. It's not, you're just getting into debt willy-nilly because of spending issues or like overconsumption. It's for a purpose, and I can handle that, right? I think if you have a clear communication with people about why do you have debt? Why are you choosing to pay it off or not? For me, I had to pay it off because, like I said, I'm so risk averse, and part of like my anxiety or issues, whatever, I don't like to feel like someone has something to hold over my head. For him, he's like, this is how I'm building wealth. I'm freeing up my capital to invest in this or that, and using this to leverage that for this asset, right? And so I think if you can come to an understanding and also understand how your cultural upbringing affects your money mindset and your experiences. Like, we've had totally different experiences growing up, our families, and the way we look at the world and the way we look at money. But we do so out of respect and caring with each other. And we have enough of the middle ground where it's like, okay, we don't have to be exactly on the same page, but there's enough of this middle that we can work together and still respect each other. Whereas my previous partnership, it was kind of like, there's a gap that keeps widening, and I don't know how this is going to work, right? And so I think it really depends on the situation, but obviously you want to consider being respectful, having mutual financial goals, and then also like, all debt is not created equal, I think it's totally different to be in a relationship with someone that has, 100,000 in credit card debt because they can't get their spending under control, compared to someone that has a mortgage or a student loan debt. And I know I just said earlier that student loan debt is not the good debt. That was my point of view. But, when you're in a relationship, you have to kind of respect where people are at and where they're coming from. And you also want them to be honest with you about where they're at and not feel shame for it either. So you have to kind of realize, is it something that I can work with, and can we work on it together? And also, how can we handle this as another part of our relationship? Because money is obviously part of a relationship. You're sharing expenses at every single stage, even if you're just dating, there's who's going to pay for this? Like, can we afford this date, or, whatever. And I think it's a huge part of the conversation. And what I've seen in so many conflicts in relationships is, people use money to control the other person, to have power over someone else, or there's just an incompatibility of values. Like, I really value this and you really value that, right? And that was kind of my previous relationship. Is like, I want to spend money on travel. I want to spend money on my retirement. I want to spend money on experiences. And he was like, I want to spend money on my music. And I was like, that's great, but that doesn't involve me. So am I part of any of this? Like, and it was like, I don't know if I am. And so it's like, obviously we want people to take care of themselves individually, but obviously if you're in a partnership, you have to have at least a little sliver of, how does this involve the other person? Can we be on a trajectory together where all of this is making sense? And also, money isn't used in an abusive fashion where it's not, held over someone's head. There aren't assets that are being restricted from someone. I mean, we see this with financial abuse in women a lot. So a scary statistic is that I believe like around 99% of domestic violence cases also involve financial abuse, which means men hold off assets so that women can't access money in their bank account. They can't spend. And it's like, obviously, if you can't spend money or you don't have access to assets, you can't go anywhere. So, that's a form of abuse that's also not as common, that we don't hear about as often, but it seems, from what I've seen in the research, a big part of domestic violence. And so there are so many different ways that money issues present itself in relationships. And I think it really just requires compassion, curiosity, I think it really requires understanding how money issues were brought up as in childhood and with your family, because that creates so much of the foundation of what we have to unpack later, and also can inform, oh, that's why my partner acts that way, or that's why I act that way, right? And we can try to have mutual understanding.
Yeah. Wow, that was nice.
Yeah, I liked it.
I guess I kind of wanted to kind of go back like on when you were speaking about it depends on why people rack up debt. It can be trauma, it can be out of boredom. So I kind of had this I just want to hear what you think about it. So I kind of had this self-awareness moment, and I was talking to Sonrisa about it, where it was now I'm aware of it. I'm already months ahead of it, but I just still want to elaborate on it. In the sense of I remember we were talking about hey, so what's going on with your debt? Why do you have it? And I was like, it's funny. I was I don't like having debt, but something about just messing it up kind of is I guess kind of how you said, it's a quick dopamine rush, right? And it's just I'm so bored paying it off and not getting anything out of it, even though I am, but so I would have moments where I'd be let me see if I can mess this up real quick. and it's interesting because even in relationships with any relationship, sometimes the boyfriend or girlfriend will want to go back to the toxic ex just because of all that rush. So I kind of want to know what are your thoughts on that? Why would people want to self-destruct something that's good, I guess? And it's
Yeah, I think there are a few things, and this is just from my personal experience and whatever things I've learned along the way. I'm not a mental health or a financial health professional,
right.
but from what I've learned from others and what I've learned through lots of therapy and lots of reading, first of all, self-sabotage can be very powerful. Sometimes we're fearful of what is on the other side. And I actually experienced this myself when I was close to paying off my debt, because I had been paying off my debt 9 years total, but for 4.5 of those years, I was really hardcore about it. The first 5 years, I just paid the minimum, didn't think about it. Then I went to grad school. And then when I graduated NYU for 4.5 years, I was wild, right? And I was approaching my debt freedom date, and I saw that it was coming. And I was who am I going to be without debt? I was I've been in debt since I was 17 years old. I'm 31. I've never not had debt in my adult life. And I was scared. I was who am I going to be without debt? And also now I've built this brand called Dear Debt. Am I going to have a career after I pay off my debt? So I had a lot of fear. And obviously I worked through it because I was well, I'd rather be debt free. But it was interesting to see those feelings pop up, because I think that really gets to the crux of self-sabotage, because sometimes the fear of the unknown is so much more powerful than the fear of the known. I mean, there's that saying that it's better for, to experience the devil than the devil you don't know, right? It's well, I already know what it's like to be in debt. So, I mean, it's better that than, finding out what's out there. And we see this with people in toxic relationships. It's what are you doing? Why don't you just break up with them? There's better fish in the sea. Same logic. We're well, I know this. This is a known entity to me. Even if it's not healthy, I know it. And because I know it in some weird, messed up way, it feels safe to my nervous system. So I'm going to keep repeating that until I have the courage to face the fears of the unknown. And also, besides self-sabotage, sometimes we are unconsciously recreating trauma or chaos because it feels safe to us. So on my podcast, I recently interviewed Paco de Leon, who's the author of Finance for the People. She has a fantastic new book. And she talks about that in her book, that sometimes people rack up debt or overspend because they're literally recreating the circumstances of their childhood. They saw their parents struggling with bills. They saw their parents struggling with debt. And it's I felt safe in chaos in a weird way, even if I didn't. So I'm going to subconsciously, unconsciously, whatever you want to say, recreate that because that's what I know. And as you said, you're aware of it now, right? Awareness is the first stage, because when you're unconsciously doing that, clearly you're not really aware. You're just doing it. And you're kind of like, why am I doing this? I know this isn't good for me, but I can't seem to change. Well, once you have that awareness of like, oh, this must be serving me in some kind of way, because here's the thing, you're getting something out of it, whether you realize it or not. Like with drinking, with drugs, with overspending, all these types of addictions that we're like, of course they're bad for us. Of course they're not serving us. They're serving us in some kind of way, either because they make us feel safe in the moment, they make us feel happy in the moment, they are recreating childhood drama or trauma or chaos that feels familiar. Something that I've dealt with in the relationship realm that I think can probably be attributed to this situation as well is sometimes we are literally recreating dynamics from childhood, hoping for a different outcome. And we're just like, why do I keep recreating this? And it's not until you're like, oh, I'm unconsciously recreating the same thing I saw my parents do. Oh my God. And then you have to make hard decisions and you have to completely overhaul your life. And that is scary. That's exactly what I did when I ended my former relationship that was no longer serving me. Is I had to be alone for the first time after a 9-year relationship. I had to live alone for the first time in a long time. I had to start over at age 32. So yeah, we broke up a year after I paid off my debt. And, you know, it was so difficult, but I had to get through that hard time to get to the healing. And sometimes when we're making these quote bad choices, it is either because we're self-sabotaging in a way because we're scared of the unknown, or we're just recreating chaos or drama because that's what we're used to in some kind of way. Like however our childhood was, our dynamics were, we saw that our nervous systems were attuned to that. So even if it's like bad objectively, our nervous system was like, this feels normal. And actually like dealing with healthy things feels very abnormal, right? You're just like, oh my God, this feels weird. But you have to kind of get used to that new weird to heal.
I think it was something that you also said on your previous, like the most recent episode that you had with, I think Rakim was his name.
Yeah.
And it was like, you said, I think it was you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was you that said that, like, even though you go to therapy, like therapy alone itself won't help you. You know, sometimes the trauma is in your body, like your body feels it more than what you mentally think about it. So I thought that was pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah, I did say that. And I want to share. So the book that really transformed my whole life is this book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's all about trauma. And as you can guess from the title, the body keeps the score. So if you've ever had a situation where you're reacting larger than life, or you don't know like why you're reacting so much compared to the trigger, it's probably trauma. Or like if you feel those sensations in your chest or your stomach or your limbs, or you feel like someone's hijacking your brain, that's probably trauma. And what that book really showed me is that, you know, therapy is really great to heal with life change, depression, anxiety, helping you think about things in a new way, reframing things. Like my therapy has been so wonderful for that. But what the book says is somatic therapies, meaning therapies that are rooted in the body, are what can really help you with trauma. Because what the book said is that, you know, they interviewed Vietnam vets. Therapy did not work for them because they were forced to reenact what happened again and again and again. And you can imagine in therapy, you talk about hard stuff. If you're talking about the deepest traumas of your life again and again and again, you can imagine that you're literally re-traumatizing yourself. So what the book found is for people with severe trauma, talk therapy doesn't really help because you're kind of re-traumatizing yourself. But what helped was breath work, like deep breathing, kind of healing that nervous system, right? Meditation, EFT tapping. So there's this like kind of tapping where you're tapping on meridian energy points. I had no idea about tapping literally until like 2 years ago. And
I never heard
it
about
feels,
Me either.
it feels, if you go on YouTube and type in EFT tapping, you'll find so many weird things. And it feels very weird because you're just like saying stuff and tapping and you're like, this feels weird. But I promise you, you feel better afterwards. And what they showed in the book is that some of those modalities worked. And so talking about thinking outside of the box, like, all the traditional therapies, oh, go to talk therapy, go on medication. Yes, those work in many cases, but they don't work for everyone. And what the book found is for people with severe trauma, people who have been in war, people who have been raped, people who have been in, robberies or like horrific things that we don't even want to speak about. Medication and therapy might not work because it's so much deeper. It's literally stored in the body. So you have to kind of heal it through the body. So moving the energy through tapping, doing breath work, meditation. There's a specific therapy called EMDR, which is like something or other. I forget the name of it, but these different kind of body-based modalities, which are really helpful. And so, I'm a fan of like, whatever makes you feel better, like that's healthy and is like not self-sabotaging. And what I do is I track my mental health and my mood on a scale from 1 to 10. And I do this typically before I do an activity. So like, let's say before I work out, I'm like, my mental health is not great right now. It's a 3, which, 1 is terrible, 10 is great, 5 is average. It's a 3. I'll work out and I'm like, after working out, it's a 5. And when you're depressed, feeling average feels fantastic. And so just to take note of what are the things that actually do boost my mood. And so for me, going for a walk boosts my mood. Going to boxing boosts my mood.
Nice.
Taking a nap. Sometimes just eating or drinking water, you're like, oh, I didn't realize my blood sugar was like at the hangry level. So just like being curious about what's actually making you feel better. And I think you can do that with your money too. Like after a purchase, do you feel better or do you feel worse? When you pay it off, do you feel better or do you feel worse? Because ideally we're using money as a tool to live our lives and to spend on our values and to support others. So I know we've all had that experience where we spend money on something and we're like, ugh, why did I spend money on that? Like, I wish I didn't do that, or like, oh, that was too much money, and we had that feeling. And it's like, okay, instead of beating myself up about it, because that's not going to change anything, let's just use it as a data point. Okay, that's not worth spending money on, right?
Yeah, and I kind of want to go back to like the idea of how, like you were talking about how debt affects different parts of your life. Have you seen the new survey from the National Debt Relief that came out a month ago?
I don't think I have. Tell me.
So I was kind of doing some research prior to this interview, and I wanted to know like how debt, because you were talking about how debt affects you mentally, and so they did a 2000 American survey, and they showed how debt not only affects the mental part of your life, but how it also affects social and marriages. And so just kind of a few data points. More people, 38% increase in stress, 33% increase of anxiety, 32% increase in moodiness. They were getting less sleep because of that. They were having more nightmares. Almost, they were saying it was kind of equivalent to PTSD because they're reliving the same trauma over and over. Kind of like you're talking about when you're in talking about like the music, and you're just kind of repeating the same track. People are less likely to get married because of that, so about 60% of people said they were not wanting to get married because of that. They would consider divorcing somebody because of that. 54% said that. And then, they wouldn't go on a date. 38%. So it's so interesting. And the biggest debts were credit card debt at 45%, medical loans at 34%, and owing money to mortgage at 32%. And then what was all this to say that debt affects not just one part of our lives, but it affects all parts of our lives. And what was fascinating was, even though all this sounds like terrible and horrible, kind of like what you said, when you had that epiphany or that final breath of fresh air of being debt free, 87% said that they agree of getting out of debt feels like they're getting control of their life again. And so it's just so interesting to see how much debt can affect. It's affecting both our health, our mental health. It's affecting marriages. It's also affecting how much we go out. And just kind of, I noticed that you talked about mental health particularly, but you said it also affected you socially and in your love life as well. So I'm just kind of, what do you think about all that?
I mean, I'm not surprised by any of that. Like, from what I've heard through my years of blogging and writing, that sounds very much in line with what I'm hearing. So I want to share something with you that, is shocking to people when they first hear it. But I mean, I've been dealing with this for literally 7+ years. And so sadly, it's normal for me. But after the first year of blogging, I was looking at my SEO analytics, and like one of the keywords that someone found me was, I want to kill myself because of debt. And I was like, oh my gosh, like someone literally Googled that and found my blog. And I wrote a blog post as if I were talking to that person. Like, debt is not a death sentence. You are not alone. You are not alone. And because I wrote about that topic, then suddenly I started getting a lot more traffic. And I hate to say it, but that is one of my top search terms to this day, is I want to kill myself because of debt. And I have been getting emails almost every month, almost every week for the past 7 years of people who are literally suicidal because of their debt, because they feel like they can't go on, because they feel like, why are they working so hard for what? And what's interesting is people email me, I feel like kind of as like a last resort, because they feel like I won't respond and they feel like I'm just a rando on the internet. So they're like, let me vomit on you and like you'll never respond, so I don't care. And they're always shocked to find that I do respond. And I respond for that exact reason, because I feel like it is a cry for help. If you are contacting a stranger on the internet, sharing your very personal details of your financial life, and it shows me two things. Number one, the taboo around debt and mental health is so strong. So many of them say, I'm only contacting you because you're a stranger, because you don't know me. And you're the only person that knows this. Their wife doesn't know it. Their husband doesn't know it. Interestingly enough, I would say 75% of the emails are from men. And a lot of them are, I can't support my family. My family would be better off without me. Or I can't be the husband I thought I should be. And what I've also shared on the blog is that my grandfather on my mom's side died by suicide when my mom was 5. So like I said earlier, my mom was raised by a single mom with 6 kids. That's why, because when she was 5, he died by suicide. And there are rumors, though not verified, that it might have been finance related. So this is very personal for me, by the way, also. So, I always respond to people that I never met my grandpa on my mom's side because he died by suicide, potentially because of finances. My mom only got to know him for 5 years, and you bet everything that affected the rest of her entire life. The way she related to men, the way that she grew up, like there's just no way that doesn't stain your entire family history and affect every aspect of your life. And I'm like, I promise you, like your family will not be better off without you. Like they need you, they want you, like your love and your presence matter so much more. But people have this idea, oh, well, they'll get my life insurance policy, which by the way, if you die by suicide, most likely they won't, because there's like a suicide clause with life insurance payments. So no. But there's this like idea that they'd be better off without me. And I always try to tell people like, no, they won't. And debt is not worth it. And like I said, it's so fascinating to me that so many of them are men. And there's this kind of toxic masculinity, which I just want to say that, like, I know men maybe don't necessarily like talking about toxic masculinity, because most of the time women are talking about how toxic masculinity affects them. But I think it's also important with the mental health and money conversation to talk about how it affects men, because toxic masculinity tells them that they're supposed to be the providers. They're supposed to be strong. They're not allowed to have emotions. They have to be, you know, the caretaker for everything. And it's like, that pressure is insurmountable and is hurting a lot of men who actually need to say, here's where I'm at now, financially and mentally and emotionally, and I need your help as an equal partner. And I can't be like the big, strong guy right now in this moment. And I really would love for men to be able to have more conversations like that, because I think that would shift the culture for both men and women in a positive way, because toxic masculinity hurts both men and women, because then it's like, men are getting violent, men are, you know, hurting themselves, they're hurting other men. They have this enormous pressure on them to be the provider, to feel like they can't ever cry. And it's like, we already know how that happens. Like, what happens with that? It's like, it's not healthy for anybody. And so I would love to shift the conversation around that. And I always try to tell the people that email me, like, it's not worth it. And, you know, what keeps me up at night with those emails is, you know, for people that come to me with traditional debt in the US, I can say, if you have federal student loans, you can go on an income-driven repayment plan. If you have a very low income, you could qualify for $0 payments and actually stay in good standing. So, fun but not so fun fact, I could have gone on an income-driven repayment plan and probably paid $0. But because I was so obsessed with the interest, I was like, I don't want to do that because I know it'll hurt me more in the long run. So I didn't. But if that's really a struggle for you, go on an income-driven repayment plan and have $0 payments until you boost your income. You can also get student loan forgiveness after 20 to 25 years. If you have credit card debt, though it's not ideal, there's bankruptcy. I mean, I would never like willy-nilly steer someone towards bankruptcy, but I'm like, well, if your other option is suicide, I think bankruptcy is a better solution. But like I said, what really keeps me up at night is sometimes I hear from people who have, I don't know, like there's not like a great phrase for me to use, but like black market debt or like gambling debt or like, you know, peer-to-peer. Like I get people from other countries, like from the Philippines or India, and they're like, if I don't pay back this debt, they're going to harm my family. They're going to hurt me. And so like I said, I don't know like the proper phrase, but like kind of black market debt, kind of like not official lenders, but like mafia-esque type things. And it's like, I don't have a solution for that. I don't know. And that's what keeps me up at night, knowing like for people in the US, I can try to give the best advice that I can, that debt is not a death sentence, that you can do bankruptcy, income-driven repayment, you know, 0% balance transfer. But like I said, I get a decent amount of people in India and the Philippines who are like, if I don't pay this person back, they're going to harm my family. I have to hide. And that terrifies me. And to think that that could be a relatively common situation globally, unfortunately, that is like beyond the scope of what I can do to help. But just knowing that that exists, like that just shows you how much people are really quite literally mentally and physically hurting because of their debt. And in some situations, if it's kind of like non-traditional routes of debt, could put their safety, like, you know, who knows about these people, right? Like, so all the stats you were saying, I'm like, everything that I've heard from all the emails I've received over the years, like that sounds about right, sadly.
I think also I think what the stats do is they tell a picture of what's going on in the United States. So it's painting a picture, you know, we just passed the, you know, pandemic, whatever, you know, people, you know, it was a big change for a lot of people. And then, you know, I think also part of it is, you know, more women are going to college than men. And so a lot of the manufacturing gets shipped overseas. And so for guys that never went to college or are struggling to figure out what to do, it's hard for them to figure out a way to make a living in a space where every year, like you were saying earlier, inflation is going up, rent is going up. I mean, we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so it's one of the most expensive places in the world. And
Yeah.
it's like owning a house is becoming very, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's becoming very difficult. It's
Over
very,
like $1
very,
million, right?
yeah. I mean, houses in that are like in the suburbs are like 750,000, 650,000. And so either it's like you either change like all the teachers, you know, to have a community, you need to have teachers, doctors, police, firefighters, stuff like that. But if you don't have those, how are you going to have a community? Is it just going to be one weird bubble of just rich people running around? You know, is everybody going to have to commute 2 hours away, like super commuters, what they call, and drive 50 miles? And so there's, you know, I think it's a bigger discussion, and like we try to bring it up a few times because we think it's probably one of the biggest things that's happening out here. And it's just, here is just a microcosm. You know, a lot of the tech people are moving to other places in parts of the States, and they're causing the prices to be up, and they're going to start feeling those impacts. So yeah, I mean, I think having debt and inflation and all that, I think it's just a reflection of what's going on. And I think as long as we continue to have the conversation, I think we can keep helping people out, you know?
Yeah, I think, it's really important to bring these issues to light because people either don't talk about them at all and think they're alone, which, I mean, I thought I was totally alone in my debt payoff journey. And then I blogged about it, and so many people were like, I'm dealing with the same thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, none of my friends were talking about it. Nobody I know talked about it. So I thought I was alone. So we can destigmatize, these issues, and then also just make it more normal, and also have real conversations about what's going on. Because yeah, in this historical period of time, money stuff is wild. Even like someone in finance who feels like I relatively have my stuff together these days, it's like, I went to the grocery store this week and I was like, my $50 groceries are now $75 groceries, and gas is over $5 a gallon. We live in LA, and we were thinking like, oh, maybe we can buy somewhere else. And I'm like, I think we might just have to stay put for a while, forever. Like, I don't know. Like, it seems like things are tightening up, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I just, like you said, I feel like a lot of more working class people and people in poverty are going to feel it the most. And I think that's sad because they're the ones that suffer. And it's like, it's expensive to be poor.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be broke. And I just really wish this country had paid leave, both for sick leave and for parental leave, and also healthcare. I think that would also take a big chunk of the equation off of people's like stress, because I mean, we've seen in the pandemic, so many women have been pushed out of the workforce as well because of childcare. Because like there's like no one to take care of the kids if childcare is closed because of a pandemic, and then it's like that hurts women's earnings. There's just like so many issues that are just so difficult right now. And then, as you said, men aren't going to college as often as women, so then they're having a harder time finding jobs. I mean, I hope that we can find some positivity to continue with people for their money and their mental health. But all of that to say, there are many systemic issues that are not personal, because I think a lot of people read personal finance content and they can feel shame and blame and guilt, even if they're supposed to be inspired. But it's like, please look at the systemic equation here. Like, the math isn't mathing here. So it's not just you. Like, if you're not able to make it work, it's not all because of everything you've ever done, right?
Yeah, it's not like you can just, what they call, put yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not that simple.
I hate that statement.
It's not that simple, because there's other things that are going on that behind the scenes that you probably you're not even aware of, that's going on. But
I hate that phrase so much. It's like, that wouldn't even be possible. Like, if we're taking the metaphor towards reality, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That wouldn't even work actually in real life, like ever. So who came up with that? Why? Like, it doesn't even work.
I just got verify, man.
Oh, yeah.
I guess. So you want to just move in towards the end?
Yeah, we can.
Melanie, we want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to start transitioning towards the end of the podcast. So one thing we like to do on here is ask rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Just 5 quick questions, and let's see how you do.
Nervous.
All right. First one. What's your favorite color?
Favorite color? Purple.
Ooh. All right. Favorite number?
7.
Favorite wrestler growing up?
Hulk Hogan. That's the only one I know, I think.
It's all good. You live in LA, but you've been to the Bay Area, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's a pre-question to the question. Okay, what's your favorite Bay Area like view or like location you ever came across?
Oh gosh, I love the marina area in SF. It's just so stunning. Like in the Baker Beach area, Haight-Ashbury, Lombard Street, Fisherman's Wharf. I know it's super touristy, but the sourdough bread bowls get me every time.
Or like
the soup and everything, right?
Yeah. The Ghirardelli, the ice cream sundaes.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's why it's cool. Yeah, they have cool tourist stuff. Okay, and then last question is this might be a little difficult, but who is your favorite Bay Area artist or like actor like that you may have know?
I know someone from the Bay Area that I love, and now I'm like having a blank of.
Yeah.
Well, what are some Bay Area rappers?
The most known one is like you have E40, you have Too Short,
Mac Dre,
rest in peace. Then you got more old schooler ones. Like you got Rapping Forte. You can
argue. Okay, can I? This is like gonna probably date me or like make me cheesy, but can I tell you my favorite song about the Bay?
Okay, that works. Cool. Yeah. Dude, that's good.
Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding.
Ooh.
Which I was listening to that today, and I listened to it on the oldies station when I was growing up with my parents, and I was like, this sounds cool, sitting by the dock of the bay, just relaxing, watching the water. And then I listened to the song today and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so depressing. Like it's about how he left his home in Georgia and he's like 2,000 miles away and nothing has changed, and he's just sitting by the dock of the bay and like nothing's changing. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's like suicidal. He's like on his last like breath of hope. And I was like, it's interesting how like you listen to a song as a kid and you're like, this is so cool. And you listen to the lyrics as an adult and you're like, oh man, he was in the bad place.
I've seen so many TikToks of that. Like they'll just replay a song and then they'll have the lyrics and then they react to like, whoa, wait a minute.
What was I singing to?
Yeah, there's been a couple, I had the same reaction. I'm like, whoa. Like, I never thought they were talking about that.
If you haven't listened to it, definitely listen to Sitting by the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding and be like, oh.
Nice.
But it is about San Francisco, so.
No, sick. Yeah, those are all mine. So thank you for
that.
What's one tip if somebody wants to feel like they want to get back into control of their debt and they're coming out of life, they kind of don't know where they're going? What's one tip you would give them so they can feel like they have a handle of it?
This is the most painful part, but it will get you out of denial, and that is looking at the numbers. So I know it's like seems very basic, but for so many people, you're in denial. Like I didn't get to share this part, but when I first started to be like, oh, I need to pay off my debt, I created a mint.com account. I saw how much I owed. The next day I deleted my account and I was like, I'm going to pretend I just didn't see that. And like, I was in full-fledged denial. And then it wasn't until months later where I was like, I can't afford to live in New York anymore. Did I have to make a change? So if you can face those numbers head on and take a deep breath and not just be like, I'm going to pretend I didn't see that. Seeing what you owe can then help you make a plan with your monthly payments, your repayment term, how much interest you're paying. And it's probably the most painful part because denial is very comforting, as we know. Like denial is a safety coping mechanism. but we have to kind of get past that and see what we owe. And a lot of people have an idea of what they owe, and then they look at the actual numbers and they're like, oh, interest did its thing. And now it's way more than I thought. I thought I owed 100,000, but now it's 150,000 thanks to interest that I haven't looked at for a couple of years. So really looking at the numbers will give you a sense of clarity and power, and then you can make a plan, because you can't really make a plan if you don't know how much you owe.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
have anything else?
Nah, I think that's all the
All
questions.
right, cool. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I know you took your time off your day to come over. You could have been doing anything else in the world, so you came here to join us, and thank you for coming on. And
Appreciate it.
we appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It was fun. Thank you.
All right, Melanie. With that, we bid you a farewell until next time.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye, Melanie.